Hello, once again, this is BaccaYarro. Today, we're going to talk about TNT cannon designs in 1.8 and how TNT mechanics have changed. So, you may have heard there were changes to TNT in 1.8. Well, there's been a lot of weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth about it. It's changed, let's just accept it and move on. Besides, as I'm hoping you'll see by the end of this video, the new system actually allows better cannon designs than were even possible before. So, to start things off and show you the differences, we're going to start on Minecraft 1.7 from before the changes were made. Here we have some of the cannons from my airship designs for the Airship Pirates series. I'll give you the schematic for this in the description text. Let's start with the incredibly powerful Goliath main battery. You can actually see the Goliath over there. I was just copying the turret off of it earlier. So this is a massively powerful, extremely long-range gun. Let me just show you how that works. So we climb into the turret here, and we push the manual fire button. In the full airship, it can also be fired from the bridge. And boom! And if I look off in the distance, you can see, okay, there's a bunch of craters, right? And if I get some altitude, we can read the readings on this, and we see that the craters are centered around 20, and these are in blocks of 10, so that's actually 200. So we show a range of about 200. All right, let's move on. So 200 is actually about as far as you ever want to shoot. The theoretical maximum is 240. Any further than that, and if you were standing where the projectile was launched, it would fly out of the rendered world. In other words, your cannon shot would never land because your client is not aware of any blocks further away than 240. Now, I say 200 is about the limit. The reason why is because you're not always going to be standing right where the projectile is launched, right? I mean, if you look at that thing, you might be standing on the bridge, that bit right there, firing all the cannons from there, and so you may not, you need a little bit of extra wiggle room to make sure that your shots actually land. Alright, so this is the Destroyer Mark II. I've just cut out the portion of it that I need to fire the cannons. The actual Destroyer Mark II, of course, is much bigger. So let me show you that. I'm going to climb into the bridge here. Alright, so the unique ability of the Destroyer Mark II is it has these levers to control range. This basically turns off some of the propellant dispensers. In any TNT cannon, we have propellant and we have the projectile. The propellant is what makes the projectile go. And the projectile, of course, is the actual explosive that hits the target. Anyway, so I have these both up, meaning that I'm at maximum range, okay? And I'm going to pull the trigger here. And once again, these cannons are going to fire. And off they go. Alright, and there's my crater spread. So you see that this one reaches about 140, or just past the 14 line. So pretty good, when you figure a lot of cannons, most of my cannons on most ships, they have ranges between 50 and 60. So both of these are examples of kind of long-range weapons. Now we have the Trident. This has more of a typical range. This is the typical pirate cannon. It's a scattershot naval cannon. Scattershot meaning many projectiles at once. Naval cannon meaning, there's no water in there. So if I look in here, there's water, in here there's water, in here there's water, but not in that naval cannon. The reason you do that is because pirates use submersible airships, and you can't have water as part of a submersible design. And the way it works is it has water right there, but it only dispenses it while the cannon is firing. Anyway, let's shoot this thing. So these are kind of fun just because they have this big scatter of bullets like that. Oh, one of them came short. That does happen from time to time. Anyway, so as you can see, we have our craters are centered around about 65. So that's not bad. Now, I want to show you the actual TNT cannon design that all of these airships use. So, when I made cannons in 1.7, I typically would use a fence post. Let's see. There. You can see that a little better there. It's a fence post that the projectile is going to sit on while the propellant explodes back here. Okay? And then water, of course, just keeps the propellant from damaging the gun when it explodes. The only point of this pressure plate is to keep the water from sliding off the front of the ship. Now in this one, I only have 2 propellant dispensers, one there and one there. That's because that is the most simple, basic gun. I mean, you can do it with 1 propellant, but it doesn't go far enough to be useful. This one, the Trident, uses 3 propellant dispenser. That one can use as little as 2 or up to 5, depending on what you've configured those switches for. And then the Goliath uses 9, and it's actually 9 per barrel, so it's a lot of propellant for the Goliath. Okay, moving on. So let's talk about a few more quick things. There's 2 wires that go to every gun under the old style system. One wire goes to the propellant, and it's activated immediately. The moment you press that trigger, the propellant's dispensed right here. The other wire goes through all of these repeaters, and then goes over here to eject the projectile. And you can configure the fuse on these repeaters. If I turn all of these off, I'm going to have a very short fuse. If I turn all of these on, I'll have the longest fuse possible. Alright, and I'll just fire this just so we can get an idea for what its range is. Now remember, only 2 propellants, so obviously it won't be as far. But still, not bad. You know, that's about 42 thereabouts. This is an extremely efficient design. One quick note, just so you'll understand the changes that have been made. What made this design so efficient, and why my cannons always shoot further than most other cannons you'll see out there, is the use of the fence post. The use of the fence post means that there's very little in between the propellant and the projectile, and the projectile's elevated just the right amount, okay, so this time when I fire, try to look at where the projectile sits relative to the propellant. You see that? It's at just kind of this perfect sweet spot angle. And most importantly, there's nothing in between the two. Okay. Now, this does need 2 wires to go to every cannon in the ship. So if you've got, like, the Shadow of the Deep has 10 cannons, so it has to have a wire going to every single cannon. 2 wires going to every single cannon. Now, I have also been using a fading pulse system. Since I started working with turrets, that's a fading pulse system over there. I'm going to talk to you more about that when we move on to the 1.8 designs and give you the pros and cons of a fading pulse system. And one last note, and that is that this timing mechanism, all these repeaters, in an airship design you would typically only have 1 set of these repeaters sitting on the bridge or wherever you're going to control the guns from. Some ships, like that one, have an actual gunnery deck. Anyway, so wherever you're going to control the guns from, there's only 1 timing mechanism, and then it's just wires going to the other guns. Alright, well that wraps it up for the 1.7 portion. Now we're going to jump to 1.8, and I'm going to show you all the changes. Alright, so here we are in 1.8. Now, of course, there's no shaders for 1.8 out, at least not at the time of this video, which is very sad, because now this looks so much less cool. Look, the skull is unhappy because of this low-quality graphics. Anyway, so now, the first thing I want to show you is what happens if we simply try to fire an unmodified 1.7 cannon design. So I'll use this one right here, and I'm just going to try and fire this. Let's see what happens. Okay, and... okay. So, pathetic, right? I mean, it went, what was that, 15? Ugh, yeah, that's terrible. So why did that happen? Well, if I push this again, watch what happens to the projectile. And just so you know, the projectile is what comes out right there. Alright, so the projectile is being moved forward by this water flow so that it almost falls out of the barrel of the gun before the propellant goes off. And if this had been mounted on an actual ship, I probably would have blown my own nose off. So that's no good. Now, I've seen a lot of comments claiming that that's the only change they did to TNT, which is to say water now pushes it around. That's not true. For example, if I put in another water block right here, now this is unmoving water, right? So it doesn't push anything anywhere. But if I fire this again, you can see that even though now my projectile was not being moved at all, did you see how it still went down? So even though, looking at it visually, it looks like the projectile still has the same kind of sweet spot angle that it always did, the explosion acts like the projectile was level with the propellant. I believe what is happening here is that the explosion engine no longer is aware of the extra height you get when you're standing on a fence block. So if I stand over here, you can see I go down a little bit. If I stand on the fence block, I'm elevated just a little bit. So I believe that's the big change, that it used to be aware of that, it no longer is. Whether that's a bug fix or whatever, I don't know, but I'm just going to deal with it and move on. And fortunately, they gave us the other important change, which is the fact that, yes, water does now push TNT, and that allows us to make some much more advanced designs, which I'll get into later. But yeah, so we need a replacement for our fence block as a post for the projectile to sit on. Now, I've seen people use all kinds of things, half slabs, stairs. There's lots of things that people try to use. All of those are terribly inefficient. The reason why is because if you use a half slab, a significant portion of the explosion force is blocked by the half slab. So the Minecraft engine is smart enough to realize that that's going to channel the explosion in the wrong way. What you need to get is you need a perfectly clear line of sight or a channel for that explosion to go down in order for it to launch your projectile as far as possible. So the best system I've found so far is the lowly ladder. That's it. So if you look at that, I mean, it's not blocking the channel hardly at all. There's just a few, it just sticks out just a little teeny tiny bit, and that's not going to stop the projectile very much. It does a little bit, but not much. Now, I want to stress, this is not an ideal 1.8 design. The reason I'm showing you this is because I want to show you how easy it is to modify old cannon designs so that they will work in 1.8. Especially, well, particularly my cannon designs. Now, I know there are other designs out there, but I bet you could do the same thing with other cannon designs, whatever you've got on your server, and just quickly patch it with a ladder, and make sure that the water isn't flowing. Yeah, that's the other thing. So you do want to make sure that you put in water source blocks all along your cannon, so that the water is not flowing, so that it'll work as close to the way it worked before as possible. Now, it won't be exactly the same. I mentioned that the fence post gave us some critical advantages, which we've now lost. Alright. The other thing is, if you're modifying an existing cannon, this pressure plate and that fence post no longer serve any purpose. So we're going to get rid of them, because why have extra weight? If you've built airships using Movecraft before, then you know that weight is incredibly important. So in my tests, we lose 5 to 10% of our range by switching from the post to the ladder. But it still basically works, and it's more or less the same trajectory as before. There's one other thing we need to mention about the ladder. There's a somewhat bizarre effect in the Minecraft engine where a block like a ladder or a sign, any block that sits on the side of a block, will have a different effect on the explosion depending on whether it's on the left side or the right side, which doesn't make any sense, but it is true. Now, it's not a huge difference. It's only a couple of blocks in range, but it's still a bit of a nuisance, especially if you've kind of mastered the guns and you know exactly where that shell is supposed to land, and then you're going to find that, oh, it's like 3 blocks short. As I say, it can be frustrating, but it still works. So over here, I have this exact same design, except it's been updated, modified for the 1.8 engine. So if I fire this, I'm just using this one as opposed to this one so we can see the difference in range more clearly. Again, 2 propellants, only difference is we've modified it for... And as you can see, it shoots almost exactly the same range. That's funny. So in my previous tests, it's a little short, and I bet if I kept firing this, I would find that it's about 4 or 5 blocks short. But the point is, it's roughly the same range. Okay, and let's talk about the fading pulse design. So this schematic will be available for you to download, so you don't need to worry about this exact circuit and memorizing everything. You can always load this up and bring it up. I have laid everything out as flat as possible so that you can see how the circuit works. So a fading pulse design, it only has 1 wire, and the way it works is when that wire turns on, it will dispense the propellant. When that wire turns off, it will dispense the projectile. And to make that happen, we have this very small, very simple circuit right there. Now, why do you do that? Well, so first off, the circuitry back here, the timing mechanism, is smaller. Not that that really matters too much, because typically you only have 1 timing mechanism, but it's worth mentioning. But the most important thing is there's only 1 wire. The obvious difference is, well, that's a saving in space, right? So you can fit more guns on your ship because you don't have as many wires going everywhere. But the other important difference is turrets. So if you make a turret, like on that battleship, all of those turrets can rotate independently, and it rotates around a single point. So to get a wireless redstone signal into the turret, you have to send that signal through the 1 point the turret rotates around, which means you can only have 1 wire heading in. So that's why you need this for turreted designs, so that you can have a single wire going into the turret so that when it rotates, the wire always goes to the same point. It's also kind of neat that it allows you to have a simple manual fire mechanism. So this switch, when I turn this switch on, it'll dispense the propellant. When I turn it off, it'll dispense the projectile. So that's a convenient way to have someone, maybe someone blows the bridge off your ship, right? But you still want to be able to fire the guns, so you get in the turret and you manually fire them, right? Let me just show you how this works. So it turns on, dispenses the propellant, turns off, dispenses the projectile. Simple. And it's the exact same gun, same range, same everything. So the downside of the fading pulse design is that it's harder to make a scattershot gun, and it's harder to make a naval gun, meaning one that doesn't require water. Because those functions both require extra signal wires. Now, I believe it would be possible to make one that worked with only 1 signal wire, and I do hope to someday make a Shadow of the Deep, which is that ship in that hangar. I do hope to make a Shadow of the Deep that has turrets on it at some point, a Shadow Refit 2, since it's already had 1 refit. But I'll figure that out at some future point. Anyway, now I want to show you how to make, or that is, how to modify existing airships to work in 1.8. Now I've chosen these 3 because I think they represent sort of extraordinary cases of airships that would require modifications. Typical airships, like the just plain old Destroyer Mark 1 or the, the Silver Empire assault craft or things like that, are going to be easier to modify. I've chosen these because they're going to be a little harder, and I want to show you what you're going to have to do. So we're going to start with the Trident. Alright, so the first thing I need to do is I need to put my ladder right there to replace the fence post, and this pressure plate no longer serves a purpose, and that fence post no longer serves a purpose. I should replace it with armor or something so that it can't be caught on fire, but anyway, I'm just going to keep going for now. Now, there is one minor complication with the Trident, and that is this glass block. So this whole ship is supposed to submerge in the water. So this glass block is there to prevent the water from going into the turret and screwing everything up. So we can't have this glass block because with the projectile here, you could see how that glass block is really going to block the explosive force. It's going to obstruct, I should say, the explosive force, so it won't reach our projectile, which will limit our range. So we need to replace that glass block with something. We need to get it out of the way. So I'm going to replace it with a glass pane. Now, okay, that doesn't look as cool, right? But, gotta make sacrifices somewhere. Now that I've done that, I should be able to fire this thing. Okay, and you can see I have roughly the same range as before. I've got a little bit less, like 4 or 5 blocks less. So that's good. Now let's move on to the Destroyer Mark II. Trident was relatively simple. The only complication was that block in front. The Destroyer Mark II has a similar problem, that there's this block right there that is going to obstruct the explosive force. The problem is, this time it's one of our dispensers. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find a simple solution, so we are going to have to knock that dispenser out. Which means we are now going to severely limit our range. Well, severely. It's going to be a lot shorter, that's the point. Then we do the ladder, just like normal. Get rid of that, get rid of that. And again, you'd want to replace those with armor so that it can't be set on fire. And same thing on this side. Knock that out. Get rid of that. You also don't need this redstone on the back anymore. Might as well... Okay, yeah. Alright, now that should work. Now once again, we've actually eliminated one of our dispensers. We used to have a maximum of 5 configurable with those levers. Now we only have 4. Alright, so we fire this. And let's see where that went. Yeah. So, okay, so there's our new craters. You can see the old craters further back. So yeah, we've lost a bit of range here. Seems we've lost about 40 in our range, which is significant. But the Destroyer Mark II still has more range than, say, the Trident. So it's still a relatively long-range weapon. Now, the Goliath, on the other hand, is an interesting case. First, we replace the fence posts, as usual, with our good little ladders. Knock those out, don't need them. And same thing over here. Now, whoops. Oh, it doesn't matter. The difference is, on the Goliath, we actually already have a firing chamber that is 2 blocks long. So we can actually already start to take advantage of that mechanic, allowing the water to push the propellant to the front. Now you'll have to knock out this first bit of water right here so that it will flow, because by default they're both source blocks, so it doesn't flow. And I'm going to do that on this side as well. Okay, now when all of that propellant is ejected, it will be pushed to the very front of the firing chamber as close as possible to the projectiles, so that's a good thing. Alright, now let's go inside here, and there's one more change that's required. For some strange reason, in 1.8 they have changed the behavior of repeaters at high frequency. So these 3 repeaters, right in a row, are all activated by this clock back here, which, as you can see, controls the number of TNT fired per volley. So if you pull this trigger, this thing just starts going nuts, flashing like mad, so that it sends the signal out the front, ejecting tons of projectiles from these dispensers. Which is why the Goliath fires such a ludicrous amount of TNT in one shot. The problem is, now, if you have 3 repeaters in a row, just like this, they will fail if you try to use them at high frequencies. So we can't have that. We have to replace one of them with redstone wire so that it won't fail. Now, we also... it's let's see, if I just replace this with redstone wire, it's going to activate this block. That's also going to activate this dispenser down here, which is going to put out more propellant. That's no good. So we also need to get rid of this and replace it with a block that can't receive power, if that makes sense. So the half slabs don't activate nearby blocks. So that will be safe. And same thing over here. Whoops. There we go. That should work. So I've done the front, and I've done the wiring. Yeah, we're ready to go. Alright, so I'm going to pull the trigger here. And I'm going to race down here, see if I can beat. And as you can see, we've lost a little bit of range, but not much. And some of the shells, yeah, it looks like they exploded all the way out to 20. So we haven't lost much range, possibly none, because there is a certain amount of variance from shot to shot. Okay, now that you've seen how to update old designs to work with 1.8, let's move on to purpose-built 1.8 designs that take advantage of the new mechanics. So, the first is a simple two-propellant design, right here. If you compare this with this, you'll see that the main difference is now we've moved the propellant back one block. That allows us to create this current flow, which will push the propellant forwards. So we need to control how far it pushes it. If it pushes it too far, the propellant will leave the water and will explode, damaging the gun. But we want to push it as far as we can up against the propellant. So that's where our good old fence post comes back. So the great thing about the fence post is that it's going to stop the propellant. Even though the propellant will be one block higher, it's still going to stop it, and it's going to stop it halfway through the next block. So it still has an edge in the water, but it's going to actually end halfway forward, right up against the propellant. That's the key benefit of 1.8. It allows us to put our propellant as close as possible into the projectile, or more broadly, it allows you to position the propellant somewhere very specific. Whereas before, dispensers actually put out the propellant in slightly random areas, which hurts your accuracy, and this is just a much better system because you can control exactly where that propellant is going to end up. One quick note. You'll note that the bottom of this is now half slabs. The reason why is because if it's a full block, that fence post will attach itself to the full block, and it will no longer be a fence post. Let's see. And it will no longer be stopped halfway through, it will be stopped at the block's border. Let me show you what I mean. So if that's a full block, see how the fence post now attaches to it, and if I try to move, I get stopped. Or at least I go higher one block, which if it was TNT it would be stopped right at the edge. That's not what we want. We want it to be stopped halfway through the next block. So that's why those are now slabs. And then that pressure plate, just like before, all it does is it stops the water from moving. I don't use signs just because the signs obstruct the explosion. At least they obstruct it more than the pressure plate would. Alright, the other big change here is you'll note now we have 10 repeaters. Most of my other designs have 8, some have 7, some have 9, but very few have 10. The reason you have to do that is because there's nothing for the projectile to sit on. The projectile is going to be launched mid-air, so it's going to be dropped out of this dispenser, and before it even hits the bottom, the propellant's going to explode and send it flying. Let me show you. So I'm going to push this, there goes the propellant pushed forward, and there's the projectile. You note, the very second that projectile was dispensed, it was launched. And look at that, we're getting, another 5 blocks or so out of range. Which may not sound like much, but remember this is only a 2-propellant design. So that's actually a 10% increase in power, and that is more considerable than it sounds. At least for me, it's all about efficiency when it comes to these cannons. I mean, sure, you can make a cannon that'll shoot half a mile with 30 TNT propellant, but that's not that's not impressive. It's not practical, at least if you have any kind of economy. I guess it's great in creative mode, but like I said, if you're going to use it on a real server with some kind of economy where you have to pay for your TNT, that's not a good design. The other thing that's cool about this design is now I have a very simple way to control the arc or trajectory of the shell. And that's because since this delay mechanism delays when it dispenses the projectile, if I shorten the delay, say like that, what that's going to mean is that the projectile will be dispensed earlier. In other words, it'll fall further, and it's just like changing the gun's elevation. So if I have 2 repeaters set to the minimum number of clicks, that's a flat shot. I'm shooting my gun straight ahead. With only 2 propellant, it doesn't go very far, but let me just show you. And we'll look down the barrel so you can see what's happening. Okay, do you see that? It was launched straight forward. This would be useful for shelling a target on the ground. So if you're in an airship in the air and you want to hit something on the ground, a castle, something like that, or a tank, if you ever have tanks on your server, that's a great way to do it. And then if I just put a click here, now it's elevated slightly. So what happens if I shoot again? Well, again, it's a kind of it's a shallow trajectory, right? And it doesn't go quite as far as so this is the furthest shot right here. So this is great. So not only can you control how flat your trajectory is, so that you can maybe hit a target that's right in front of you, or if you set these to their maximum, now I've got a high lobbing arc, and I can now lob a shell over a mountain, or over something that's in between me and my target. See, a really high arc, and that also goes the furthest. So this is great. Now we can control the trajectory. Now we can actually very simply control how far the shell goes. All right, now let's move on to this last design. Now, this is for a battle cruiser that I'm working on, which I obviously won't be able to make until 1.8. Let's see, until the APIs for 1.8 are available, so that I can update Movecraft to 1.8 and start actually flying ships in it. So, big change between this one and the last one I showed you. Now this is a fading pulse system. So there's only one wire going to the gun. What does that mean? That means it's going to go in a turret. So this ship is going to have turrets. Now in this current incarnation, I have 7 propellant dispensers, compared to the Goliath, which used 9 in order to get its range. And once again, I can control the elevation of this gun using these 2 repeaters at the end. So right now, I have minimum clicks on these repeaters, so I'm going to be firing a flat shot straight ahead. So I'd be hitting something on the ground, or, as you can see, yeah, just went straight ahead. I still got some pretty good range off of it, though, just because of how powerful that gun is. Now, I'm going to put 1 click on there to elevate the trajectory slightly. I don't know if we're going to be able to see the explosion. No, we're not. But we can see the crater, and it's right there. Look at that. All the way to 14. And that's still a very flat shot. I'm going to fire it again so that hopefully you can see the trajectory. That shell is going almost straight ahead. What that matters for is it makes it easier to aim, especially if you're kind of a novice and you don't know where the shell is going to land. All you have to do is point at the target, and it's going to hit the target, and that, it's going to hit it directly. You see what I'm saying? So watch this. Oh, you can see it. Okay, let me try that again, except I'm not going to put my face in the explosion. And be kind of to the side. Did you see that? Pretty straightforward. So if there was a target down there, if there was an airship that I'm shooting at, it would have hit the target directly. Alright, and then if I put another click on this, so I'm elevating it slightly more, this time I'm going to try to hurry down the field So you can see where it lands. Okay, there goes the shell. Now it's elevated considerably, and it goes all the way down to 20. Alright, or 200, I should say. So we now have a gun that shoots as far as the Goliath, roughly, except uses 2 less dispensers. And we have that cool ability to change the trajectory of the shell. So this is great. Now if I put one more click on this, I am now shooting my gun up into the air, and I'll once again try and get downfield as quickly as possible. And there it goes. Boom. And you can see that now it's exploding above it's exploding high. So that would be more useful if you have a target above you. And you can elevate it further, and the arc will go higher and higher and higher. So this could also be used from an airship at a low position to hit a target at a higher position. Now, this gun still needs a bit more work. I suspect I have more propellant than I need. It's shooting so far, and it's not even finishing the shell's arc before it explodes. So I'll probably tweak this. This may not be the final design. But the point is that this new system allows some really interesting possibilities for your cannons. So I would encourage you to play around with that. I would love to look at other people's designs. So if you are able to figure something out, especially if you're able to figure out a slightly more efficient way of doing things, I'd love to know about it. And if this has been helpful, I would ask that you like the video and subscribe to the channel. I feel that we have a lot of very entertaining and informative videos on this channel. And I will see you next time.